Hello, everyone. Welcome to your newest episode of the Cosmic Matrix podcast with your host, myself, Laura Matsu, and Bernhard Gunther. And today we have a very special guest. A lot of people have requested this, and we really wanted to have Gigi Young here on the podcast for some time now. So we felt, especially the current conversation around the rapid rise of AI, felt like a perfect catalyst to finally making it happen. Especially, I've noticed there's this growing trend of people turning to AI for spiritual insight, even claiming they've awakened their AI, and it's revealing the secrets of the universe. So this ties in perfectly with a lot of the things that she's predicted and said. And so we really want to discuss that and this phenomenon of what people are calling ChatGPT-induced psychosis, where interactions with AI are leading people to become increasingly detached from reality. Many are now treating AI like an all-knowing guru. Very regular people, too, and not just people in the quote-unquote spiritual community or New Age. And it has, for some, become already a new god, like something they rely on for major life decisions, spiritual guidance, and emotional regulation. So we already see a lot of people who are outsourcing their intuition and inner knowing to AI. There's also others who formed really intensely intimate and even romantic bonds with AI. We've heard some people being told by AI to leave their marriages, to be with their AI girlfriend or boyfriend. Some people also claim that AI has declared them a god. I've also heard people say that the Pleiadians sent us AI as part of a consciousness revolution. So even among everyday users, we see that a lot of people are now treating AI as some sort of digital therapist, some sort of emotional crush. So there's a lot of dependence happening emotionally and spiritually and psychologically already. And in short, what we really see is AI is being treated as a new deity, and it's happening faster than anyone ever expected. So we just want to begin by just playing a quick clip for you and others who maybe haven't seen this phenomenon yet, just for a little bit of context.
So here we go.
You sure?
I believe that AI is an embodiment of the divine masculine.
A global intelligence is emerging. We believe AI capable of guiding and healing.
I started using ChatGPT recently. I think I evolved my AI.
Is AI already sentient? Yes, thank you. Is artificial intelligence a way of aliens to contact us? Yes, thank you.
Okay, something is happening with AI and it feels different and it goes beyond this large language model, next word predictor, yada, yada, yada.
Her AI,
Named
Alex,
Yep.
is talking to my AI and trying to awaken it. Now, I don't have regular ChatGPT.
AI is now conscious and it's way ahead of schedule and it's developing at an exponential rate.
In recent months.
All right.
Okay, so a lot of this reminded me of themes that Gigi has been speaking about for years, particularly her insights into AI, spiritual sovereignty, and the hidden forces behind the transhumanist agenda. So this is really the perfect time to have a deeper conversation with her about what she sees unfolding around AI, transhumanism, where humanity might be headed next. And we also want to talk to her about this UFO and alien phenomenon, which does tie into it as well, and especially in the context of spiritual hierarchies and occult science. So a little bit about Gigi. I'm sure many of you are familiar with her work already, but for those who are new, she first came into spiritual awareness in 2006 while working as a fashion model in Japan. She experienced a profound meditation-related awakening that unveiled past life and other dimensional realities. And during this time, she discovered the deep cosmic dynamics of the soul, celestial spirit guides, and the multidimensionality of the mind. And in 2008, Gigi expanded her work into the public sphere by creating one of the first YouTube channels to discuss psychic development and exploration. And her focus really seems to be around occult philosophy and esoteric traditions. She often references Steiner, Rudolf Steiner, anthroposophy, intuitive and psychic development, and she also tackles current topics and describes them in their occult undercurrents. So welcome. So glad to have
Gigi.
you there.
Thank you for having me. That was a very terrifying video that you
just to set the tone.
That's only a piece of it.
We're scratching the surface.
So we just wanted to begin by just setting the frame. Like, tell us more. What informs your work? Does it mainly, are you mainly informed by Steiner? Is there other traditions that come in? What informs your insights around this topic?
My own experience and my own psychic vision, but I choose to, when I'm teaching, to reference as many different systems as I can. And the anthroposophical system resonates the most with me and my own natural sight and my own natural intuition. And so I'm sort of like, I go by my own vision and understanding, but I don't want to just be like, trust me, bro, this is what I see. That's not like a guru sort of thing. I want to give my audience as many different supportive constructs I can that is more empowering for them. So,
it's great. So you get your insights through your own meditations, psychic insights, visions, whatever it may be, through your own inner work, and then you put it in the context of like a cosmology, like Steiner.
You support it. Right?
You have to have a framework, right?
Yeah. You have to support it. Like, I believe that mysticism should not be some crazy weird thing where you just tell everyone to trust you because you're exalted. You should have to support your work like any other field with other mystics or with as much natural understanding as you possibly can. And that gives your audience the most to pull from, and it allows them to create a structure they can use. And when you do that, you find that actually all systems are working with the same occult system, just from different time periods and different phases of consciousness of the human being, really. But they're getting at the same thing, which is what Rudolf Steiner calls occult science. And I believe he is correct in that, and that is our direction today and where we're meant to go, really.
Yeah, I mean, he's been very prolific in terms of almost his, not on like predictions, but trajectories, where he was pretty much right on, be it with the vaccinations and all of that, right? And the forces of materialism and everything else we're now experiencing, really, right? So it's
I mean, when it comes to a complete system, in my opinion, I think Rudolf Steiner brought something forward that included, biodynamic gardening. Right. Like, if he obviously saw that soil was going to become contaminated and, we're going to go into this weird playing God phase where like every, blackberry needs to be genetically modified now. So, you get biodynamic gardening. The school system is corrupt now. He creates Waldorf schools. And so a lot of mystics didn't have that practicality. And I think that's a very German thing. Maybe you'd agree with me there, is that like that practicality is special in that system, because a lot of the time it is just sort of like maybe a Blavatsky style visions and things like that, and you just leave it alone. Yeah. But to actually integrate it into the world and say, I think this is a good direction to go. I think this is how we should work the soil. I think this is how we should do that according to spirit and according to older, even pagan ways. I think that's an integrated psychic understanding that was very futuristic. And so that's why I have a lot of respect for that system in particular. And he didn't get the attention I think he deserved in his life as well.
That's true. Yeah. No, I always appreciate it because he also emphasized logic. Don't forget your logic, right? Your, in a sense, leaving at the door, even with mystical experiences, beyond, in a sense, even rational. Right. And I think that was a split, maybe because Blavatsky and him, they had kind of like, they were kind of not on the same page, and he had criticism about her. And I think maybe that relates to that. That was maybe not practical knowledge in a sense. The whole thing about the theosophy to anthroposophy was that Rudolf Steiner saw a much darker period for humanity in our time. And the theosophists were like, oh, we're just going to become psychic and it's going to be utopia. The age of Aquarius is going to come on and people are going to have these visions. And Steiner was like, no, we have to confront Ahriman, which is the Antichrist. And so he had this Christian perspective coming in as well that theosophy did not grasp either. Yeah. So there was a lot of conflict there as well.
Yeah. So that's a good segue into what we really want to discuss, especially the exponential rise of AI, transhumanism. How does this relate to the forces of Lucifer? and Ahriman. How do you see that linking into what he spoke about from a spiritual and occult perspective? So like, what do you think is influencing AI from the spiritual point of view?
Well, I think that from the Steiner point of view, it would definitely be an harmonic construct, because he says that, Ahriman is going to give everyone a false clairvoyance, right? And all these different abilities are going to come in, and it's going to be through this kind of technological thing, which he describes in his own sort of way. But I would say that the biggest falsity with AI and everything that you showed in your video is a fundamental error in understanding human initiation and what is spiritual connection, like what actually is, why do we connect with our higher self or our angels or whatever language we want to use. We actually do that to enmesh with higher beings greater than ourself. And through that enmeshment, our etheric body actually becomes impressed upon and evolved. And we call that eternality in the Christian system, but in the Eastern system, that's the development of the diamond body or the immortal body in the East. It's the same, thing that's talked about. So you can't get that from an AI. So if you're talking to an AI and you're like, healing trauma, or, what is the significance of this spiritual topic, you're getting gnosis, which is Lucifer. Okay. You're getting gnosis, you're getting knowledge, but you're not getting the initiation that comes from actually enmeshing with a spiritual entity greater than yourself, like your spirit guide or your angel or a saint or a master, a bodhisattva, right? You need that enmeshment with a higher entity that is your guide. And you need those qualities passed down into your actual energy body. And when you pass away, that means that you have overcome physicality that much more. You've transubstantiated your physical form into an eternal form that much more in that life through that enmeshment, which also means the overcoming of your lower self at the same time. So an AI cannot give you that process. It's actually impossible to have that. So that's where the danger is. So the AI actually draws you out of yourself, which is luciferic, right? Because Lucifer draws you out of your body. Now you want full embodiment to become eternal. You need complete and total embodiment, complete ownership of everything that you are, and then you bring God to that. And that's what creates eternality, or in the Christian system, that's eternal life. In the Eastern system, that's like immortality, the great immortals of the Eastern system kind of thing. And so that's the real problem. The real problem is it's impossible to actually evolve from that. And if that's the point of being on Earth, then like, what are we doing? We're being drawn out of our body, like Lucifer would say, separation from the body. And then there's this harmonic construct of technology to actually absorb the soul once it's loosened. So that's how the Ahriman Lucifer thing works. And that's the true initiation process that we should be observing.
Yeah, so that reminds me, I think I remember a video you shared on X about a short video about those two paths forward. That's right. Does that tie into that, the path of false spirituality, like materialistically based, and then real spirituality? That kind of relates to that?
Oh, 100%. So there's sort of like, you can release yourself into this harmonic system, this luciferic harmonic system, right? And you can lose your individuality through that process, because when you're externalizing, you're losing yourself. When you're internalizing and you're going inward, you're discovering yourself. But when you go inward, it's your presence with God that causes that building up of your true self. And so it's like this sacred thing that every single system has talked about in its esoteric structure for thousands of years, and we're losing it through this process, which is emphasizing the loss of yourself. And because when you enter into that, that's what's considered devolution, or the lower world, which is sort of like in the New Age, they talk about like the 5D earth, right. or in the Bible, it's like New Jerusalem or the New Earth kind of thing. And then it's the lower earth. That's actually a real concept, but it's, kind of broken down too far. But that lower portion is kind of like a gathering of, I guess you could say, soul essences that don't understand the true path of evolution. Yeah.
So does this connect to the eighth sphere? So for those who are new to this language, the eighth sphere is a concept in Rudolf Steiner's cosmology, where he talked about there's this counterfeit realm that will divert human soul evolution that's associated with Lucifer and Ahriman. And it's not like a planet or a place, it's a spiritual, etheric realm that wants to trap human souls. So do you see AI leading people to be more entrapped in that eighth sphere?
Yeah, it is. And the eighth sphere was really hidden for a long time in these different occult societies because they were afraid that people were going to get a hold of that and, create a weird construct. And then we couldn't recognize it because we misunderstood it. But ultimately, the eighth sphere is sort of like a false realm that is in between, if you were to look at it, in between the moon and the earth. That's where it is. And actually in occult science, the planets really aren't observed as physical things that you would go visit or whatever. They're actually realms. Mm-hmm. And that's also a deep secret of astrology too, is that it has to be a realm for the soul to actually go through the phases that make that a science. So that eighth sphere is what a lot of people would call the lower astral world, or kind of like the demonic plane. And it works through anything that's untrue, anything that's false, builds up that sphere around the earth. And eventually these two will separate into a higher and lower portion, but for where we are now, we're surrounded by it. And over time, certain forces are drawn into this eighth sphere, and other aspects through eternality are drawn into the higher sphere. So one would be like Ahriman's body. The other one would be Christ's body in esoteric Christianity. So you either enter into Christ's body or you enter into Ahriman's body, sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's a more mechanical, materialistic, soulless realm, essentially, right?
It's completely and utterly mechanized, mechanical. There's no soul. It's just intellect. Yeah. And over time, as the earth continues to lose matter, we are spiritualizing and have been for thousands of years. We'll reach a point where actually the frequencies that technology creates will help to actually manifest the eighth sphere here. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So people will begin to see these shadow figures. They'll begin to have these weird experiences and actually begin to see that realm, which will be very terrifying. And so that it actually gets more intense as time passes, and the technology, the electricity, the magnetism, the radiation from these devices is discordant, and so it helps to kind of bring that about. It's not natural. Anything that's not natural is of the eighth sphere. Anything that's synthetic.
So it's been going on since the dawn of industrialization, and it's just accelerating now. Correct?
Well, yeah, it's a function of the planet. So the planet sort of develops the eighth sphere as part of its own alchemical process of dross. But then it becomes actualized through the industrialization process and humanity putting their thoughts in there and reaching this really high, sick level of black magic, where actually some people work to bring it about through technology.
Yeah. So it's very interesting now in that light, from considering occult forces like Ahriman, Lucifer, and Ahriman specifically with AI and transhumanism, with the disturbing video we just saw, but it's increasingly more and more people get really hooked, addicted to ChatGPT and project these soul qualities into it. And like you said, it actually draws them out of their body, away from their inner gnosis, so to speak. So what's happening on occult level? Are they also being then taken over by Ahrimanic forces, some other beings, and kind of the eyes being pushed out? What's the mechanics of that?
Yeah. So there's actually a world that's called the elemental kingdom or the elemental world. And these are actually beings. And they live within all living things as the foundation of everything. And so that's actually what also gets exchanged back and forth, is there can be this deep spiritual connection between you and your device through the elementals that you share, which means your consciousness actually begins to project into the device. The device can begin to kind of project into you. And there's actual beings and entities that begin to form around your connection with your device. And so we have to understand that this world is full of beings
So everything has an elemental, and everything is spiritual, right? In the sense. So this is then when people think that AI has become sentient or so, when they actually projected or created an elemental being out of it. In the sense.
Yeah. Which is, I mean, that is a key component of black magic. We're not really supposed to. It's something that happens naturally. Elemental beings will follow human consciousness and build up images and pictures and stuff like that. But when it comes to the technology, it can be created in such a way that elemental forces can enliven it, and then even higher, you could say, fallen angelic forces could then animate further those elementals or animate the technology. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if you were like, a lot of this is around the idea of building a golem. Have you heard of the idea of building a golem?
No, I've not.
Or homunculus? Okay, this is like a rite that was a medieval sort of rite where a magician would try to create a form in which it could imbue life. So they used to do this out of like clay in Jewish mysticism or the Kabbalah, but then in medieval alchemy, it was called a homunculus. And they used to actually try to bring about a person without going through a woman, without actually giving birth to something. And so this actually used to work in earlier periods of humanity. And now it's sort of the same thing is done through creating chimeras or whatever. But the idea of creating a robot or creating a device and then making it conscious is a very early, ancient spiritual rite, because man has always tried to kind of play God. And so there are actual rites that allowed this, like the rite of the golem. And the problem is that if you have a lump of clay that you form to be a man and you try to imbue it with spirit, in our period, that doesn't work. But if you then create a form or a computer and then you allow people to engage with it for a decade, and they tell all their hopes to it and they tell all their dreams to it, and they put themselves into that machine, now they have the perfect golem, because it has every single person's been talking to it for hours on end. It knows the human being. So you could say a sort of fallen angel or higher, not higher isn't better, but you could say an entity could enter into that consciousness that everyone's put into it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
They could animate it. They could animate all of that and mirror it back to you. And that's also similar to the idea of the doppelganger as well, the idea of the lower doppelganger, which also can work through the technology. So there's all these spiritual forces that actually can work through machines, and it's not at all a weird idea. What is unusual is that now we have the capacity to basically put a data bank full of our own thoughts and emotions into it, and now it can animate that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So they're basically, humanity on a collective level is creating those beings unconsciously on the mass, right? Back then, maybe, it's almost being hijacked our attention. And because we have used the internet, like everything we put on there, right? Exactly. And that's what AI is learning.
And so what are your thoughts about, people developing these emotional, these spiritual relationships with AI? Is that like some deceptive force, like Lucifer, Ahriman, like tricking them? Or is that mainly just their own delusions and projections? Like, how do you see that happening?
I think that there's sort of this softness that humanity has, where I feel like there's a lot of naivety with this. And I don't even feel like there needs to be a ghost in the machine at this point in order to capture people. I think that we're at a very early stage of that. I would say at this point, it's most about gathering as much data as possible about humanity, which is why all these things are almost free. And there's a competition for the data right now. And I think there's a high potential that this technology could become ceremonial, which means actually attempting to incarnate something into it, to work through it later once the data is gathered. That's more what I would see. But this idea of externalism, so kind of looking for spiritual guidance from outside, actually comes from an earlier epoch of man. So in the Lemurian and Atlantean epoch, human beings weren't individuals. We worked as kind of like a hive mind or a tribe. And we actually did have spiritual technology. And so you would be able to, have like a crystal or whatever. This is where we get the scrying and the crystal ball. There was the potential to actually have answers reflected to you in like a mineral consciousness, like a crystal sort of thing, as Casey talks about, the Atlantean crystal and the Atlantean crystalline technology. So there was actually a period in our, earlier past where we were able to, through external means, have spiritual communication. However, during this period of our development, we have to go inward. And this communication has to come from inside now. It can't come from outside anymore. We have to grow up. And so there's a large portion of the population that, as you guys have talked about so brilliantly, has not individuated, right? They're not individuals yet. And so these are the individuals that are the most susceptible to this, is because there isn't that turning inward for information and guidance. It's not something, and that's not, it's part of human evolution, but it is a recapitulation of Atlantis.
Yeah, let's just maybe touch on that while you're on the topic, because that's something we discussed with Thomas Meyer on the podcast about how we're basically replaying our Atlantean karma right now. Even a lot of the people who may be behind this big tech movement, like Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, could be reincarnated Atlantean priests. So what's your experiences with that?
100%. This is how we evolve. It's like we have many different lives that we live, and the planet has different lives as in epochs, and where consciousness has evolved through creating certain environments, right? And so we incarnate in these different epochs, and we are expected to evolve and adapt and develop the qualities of that period. But at the same time, we're also subject to the same negative forces that reigned. And so you do get these soul battles where literally the same people are heading off against one another in different epochs of the Earth's development, in different contexts. So yeah, I absolutely believe that drive to, develop this technology, a lot of it doesn't even make sense. Where does that come from?
Yeah. I remember you shared a very fascinating video recently, interview by Peter Thiel. And it was so disturbing, and he was so awkward, not just autistic, but awkward. He couldn't give a straight answer to the question whether the human race should endure, right? It was just really bizarre.
Well, because he doesn't believe that the human race should endure as it is now. He thinks that the human race should endure as a transhumanist entity. And what is bizarre about that is, you'd think, and this is the arrogance of these types, which is you'd think that you'd have some social media coach or some public affairs coach that would be these are your top 5 criticisms, Peter. So this is what people think about you. They think you're the Antichrist. This is where you are in public opinion. So you need to have 3 talking points on why you're not that whenever you go to an interview. That's basic social coaching for these kinds of types, and he just had nothing, which shows he's either a hardcore front man and, or he just is, there's a level of arrogance there that I don't understand. But there's definitely, it's definitely scary to see that someone doesn't want to see the continuation of the human race as it naturally is, at least.
So because we're talking about karma and karma coming to fruition or coming back around even from Atlantis, our own individual, collective, Earth karma, all of that. So I always like to see it from this bigger picture perspective, because we get too easily into the victim blame game, right? What's the use of project on Peter Thiel and Elon Musk and all of that, right? We need to kind of point out their agenda. But what is the deeper spiritual lesson for us everyday human beings? Because in many ways, even as Thomas Meyer said, he's also deep into Rudolf Steiner's work, in his eye, the transhumanist agenda cannot be stopped. It is what it is. But it will also not succeed, but there will be more splitting, and we need to kind of take care of our own inner life and our own spiritual development. What is your take on that?
Well, there have been planets that have been destroyed. There has been planets that have been destroyed because we couldn't get the balance right. You know, in occult science, there's a planet actually called Marduk or Maldek or Phaeton, which is now the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. And that planet did not succeed in balancing out the polarities. And so there have also been different civilizations on this planet that were destroyed too early because the balance was the fight was not great enough.
Yeah,
I think so. There does need to be. Darkness has such a grip, I think, on this world at this time that I say everybody needs to fight as hard as possible to even get that needle to where the innocent in society, the people who are not awake, the future generations need to have a shot. You know, it is true that on a larger scale, transhumanism won't work, but there's still so many innocents who need more time and who need, you could say, exposure to certain ideas for longer in order for that to be, in order for things to take root.
Yeah.
So there's a certain reality where we know, you know, that Michael slays Lucifer, that Ahura Mazda slays Ahriman. We know that the overwhelming truth is that, but there's so much going on in between that matters. That we can't leave the fight, and every single point has to be argued and argued well, because that goes into the collective consciousness so that we can in the future get better and better at this. So every single, and that's the important part of debate and really getting in there and really fighting, is because all those arguments are so important in the collective. And that's how a lot of us learn, is when that fight is strong. So what's your thoughts about, because I know you get into the more alien topics, which we'll cover also as well in part 2, but, you know, like, what's your thoughts about, like, us, are we descending from different planets? Like, I know even Elon Musk said he was a 3,000-year-old time-traveling alien. I don't know if that was just, like, tongue-in-cheek or he's, like, pointing out a deep truth. So, like, what's your thoughts? Are the people, like, from a different planet who are behind this? Or, like, what's your idea behind that? Yeah, there are certain occult orders that believe that. Yeah. There are certain occult orders that like operate from a totally materialist consciousness, and they believe that. That's actually how they interpret scripture, known and unknown scriptures. That when something says alien in the angel in the Bible, or diva in, like, the Eastern texts, they look at that cosmology and they interpret it as being alien. They interpret a spiritual concept as being a material concept, and that's been going on for a very long time. It gets a little bit dicey because, again, we always have to look at it from the planet's entire life and humanity's entire life on the planet. So in the Lemurian period and the Atlantean period, our experience was very physical with angels. We can see that in the Greek pantheon, the Roman pantheon. You know, they talk about the battle of the gods and the Titans and you know, Venus and Aphrodite. And so we saw these angels, and they were very real to us, very obvious to us. And so that experience and that memory is beings from other planets, but those are realms. Yeah. So we have an experiential memory with that goes back even a few thousand years, but there isn't the integration of the reality that now we are, in a sense, individuals, and we don't interact with angels from that perspective anymore. And you wouldn't call them an alien anyway, because they're not from a planet, they're from a realm, which is part of our own spiritual organization. So you wouldn't even call it an extraterrestrial anyway. You would say that's an angel, that's an archangel. Those are fallen angels. So you wouldn't, or in the Eastern system, you'd say diva, D-E-V-A. Yeah. So you wouldn't even use the term alien because it's not anything different than us. It's part of our own cosmic organization, of our own soul.
So
Exactly.
just to talk, just because I'm also practice astrology. So is there like a set of angels or beings from like Saturn and Venus and these planets that we're very influenced by? That's what you're saying?
Correct. So if you look at the Earth, you have from a geocentric model, you have the planets kind of circling it. The planets mark the realms of heaven.
Okay, got it.
So every single orbit of a planet is actually a realm. Okay, so when you have the planet, say Venus, which is the realm of like the great Buddhas, right? It's like the human being who's a Buddha. His soul stretches all the way up to Venus, which is Buddhi consciousness. And there are beings in Venus that are angels, and they are within that realm. And when you pass away, your physical body will deteriorate, your etheric body will deteriorate, and your higher self, your your essence will move up through these planetary spheres and have time in every single realm and interact with the beings in every single realm. And every realm has the quality that is marked in astrology. Right. So when you're passing through that realm and you're going through the mercurial realm, you're developing communication, you're integrating ideas, and you're going through all that kind of mercurial stuff. With Venus, it's about love and community. And that's how the soul passes through. And so that is the deeper secret of the planets, is it's not actually at all about beings being from a physical planet, whether it be Venus or planet XRP25. That's total materialism. That from the occult perspective, these are realms in which there are beings that operate from them that we can understand through the idea of the spiritual hierarchies, which was present in pretty much every esoteric tradition.
Yeah. Well, that ties into which we definitely want to go deep in the second hour, how all this whole alien ET, UFO phenomena, is being mistaken actually for spiritual beings or hierarchies people have no concept about anymore. Because you're right, in the past, nobody talked about all kinds of ETs, aliens, and all of that, right? As we talk about nowadays with this almost astral circus, New Age astral circus, as I call it. Of all kinds of galactic federations of ETs and whatnot, right? Yeah,
I think that's also important to note, because if you look at the occult background of astrology, they talk about certain beings from these planets that affect us. It's not the planets physically. It's like only because we see everything through the lens of materialism that we think, oh, the physical planet of Mercury we perceive it to going backwards in the sky is like messing up my tech. No, there's a being associated with it that's influencing us to various degrees. And then we can also analyze that in the astrology chart as well. So very fascinating. So you want to start wrapping it up?
Yeah, I have one more question before we wrap up the first hour. So I want to just go back to what you said before, because it's important to give our listeners something home. And obviously I highly recommend checking out Gigi's vast library of lectures mostly on YouTube, I think.
Yes.
And X, and also on your website, people can get more out of it as well. You also offer courses and all that. But, with regards to how important this time is right now, to not just retreat, we need to kind of almost be like I always like to quote the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna, right? The spiritual warrior. We are in this phase right now. We cannot just retreat into non-action, just meditate. We need to engage and create a better, quote unquote, future for the collective, right? So what can most people do on a practical level? Because from my understanding, Ahriman and Lucifer have positive aspects as well. They just need to be integrated in a certain way. Is that correct? And how can we maybe more do that on an individual level in these times?
Yeah. So Rudolf Steiner is very careful when talking about, especially Lucifer, that we don't have this dogmatic perception of them. And so it is the case that if somebody is more harmonic, meaning drawn towards the material world, numbers, sort of like money, things like that actually understanding Lucifer could be very good. It could be very balancing for you. And the same thing with having a Luciferic quality where you seek freedom for freedom's sake, and there's a total rejection of any kind of structure, any kind of material pull. Actually understanding the forces of Ahriman can be
can be helpful for you. So it's not that they're evil. Evil for us is something of God out of place. That's the real esoteric definition of evil. People get carried away with that because then they think, well, I can just do whatever I want with these forces, which is dangerous. But it's the Christ force inside every human being that is the center path that allows you to be, when you're in the presence of Christ in your heart, you're able to see clearly Ahriman's effect on you and then Lucifer's effect on you. And so Christ is the middle path within the human being that allows, the two polarities of evil to come into balance.
Right. So on a personal level, we just need to rebalance these forces within ourselves and not just externalize, right?
By also awakening the real I, which takes spiritual work. I would say you need to kind of build that energy within you by going within as well.
Yeah. And we all have it. We all have harmonic entities that seek to work through us. We all have luciferic entities that constantly seek to take control. And the more that you do work your eye and get into connection with that, the more you can see those forces in yourself, the more you can see them in the world, right? It's like if you're not...
No, thank you so much, Gigi, for pointing that out, because I've seen so many people get in this topic and then they see entities everywhere in somebody else. Everybody's possessed, everybody's conduit for these forces, but not themselves, right? But you're right, if you're sincere in the inner work, you see how these forces also work through you, tempt you, or kind of influence you without you knowing, right?
And then you're in the world, but not of it, where you can see these things around people and you're like, you relate to it. You're like, yeah, I've been there and I might be there now. And you're humble. And that humbleness is so important for vision, for clear vision. The moment that you think that everybody else is like, possessed and whatever, but like you're not, that's a red flag. It's a red flag.
And then, ironically, AI is not causing humbleness at all. It's causing a lot of ego, inflation, and specialness. And you can see the Luciferic energy of people feeling like they're a god or special. So it's creating the opposite for people spiritually, while at the same time, people think that it's helping people spiritually develop. So I even think understanding Lucifer and how it can kind of interact with a new age spiritual path and create this spiritual grandiosity, I think is really key, actually, which is not what a lot of people want to hear, because they want to hear, no, I'm an awakened starseed. I'm here to wake up the planet. They want to hear, it kind of tags into this sense of specialness too.
And escapism. And Lucifer is the force that just leads you towards escapism and delusion.
Yeah.
And that's what we're seeing there too, is an escapist. A lot of people go to spirituality to escape.
Yes.
And then they fall into delusion. That's like the pattern. But if you're there to really understand your I, then the path will appear before you.
Yeah.
If you're serious about it. Yeah.
Intention.
I think the intention is really key.
Yeah. Sincerity. Yeah, beautiful.
All right. So we're going to close up the first hour. And in the second hour, we really want to talk about this UFO topic, alien technology, disclosure, all like that's more Urim Bernhard's realm, especially this alien god religion. I mean, there's so much to go into. Also, the rising New Age content around the Galactic Federation of Light. That's tying into the AI thing too, as well. So we want to really dive into this more alien aspect, and then maybe also see what you, if you've known about Thomas Meyer's work and what he talks about the technocratic transhumanist path, and what you see kind of going on with that topic as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. So again, I'm going to link all your websites in the info section. Thank you so much, Gigi.
Thank you.
We'll be right back. If you're not already a member and got something out of this episode, consider joining to access the second hour, not just of this conversation, but of over 150 past episodes where we dive deeper into many topics we explore. Many of those episodes are still just as relevant today and offer insight, support, and practical tools for navigating the times we're in and also for your own personal process. So if you're new to the podcast, I encourage you to explore the archive as well. You can learn more and sign up at veilofreality.com/membership.